Hey Joel, how are you?
Hi Sumuk, I'm doing good. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for this
great,
session.
great. Welcome to NyayArtha's podcast. Greetings to all our viewers. Hope you're all safe and sound. Please wear a mask and sanitize yourself. Please don't venture out and follow all the lockdown protocols. Today with me, I have Joel Verghese, who's my batchmate and at the School of Law, Christ University, and he's also the co-founder of Argumentor podcast. It's a very good podcast series. You should check it out because they have exclusive content on a wide range of topics. And today we'll be basically talking about one of the pressing issues, which is with respect to Rajiv Gandhi's assassination and India's position on non-interference. So, Joel, are we good to go?
Thank you so much, Sumuk, for having me here, and especially spreading NyayArtha is actually a very good informative page, especially with all this infographic content, and hoping to have a great session with you with regard to the same.
Thanks, Joel. Thank you. Joel, I think with respect to this issue, I think we basically need to talk about, like, say, India's policy when it comes to, like, say, wars. Because traditionally, if you notice, apart from the Cholas, which was one of the great events where we actually went on to another land and captured it, I don't think there has ever been where the subcontinent has actually conquered another land or messed with the internal affairs of another. So do you think it's embedded in our culture?
Especially for the hindsight, if we look at the Bangladesh war in particular, if we might take that as an example, or even with what we're currently discussing about the Sri Lanka issue, I think like India's policy has never been to strike first, but then if someone strikes you, you need to strike back. So, like example, what you see in Balakot in particular. But then, especially if you're talking about this issue in particular, I think India was in a fix. Because the entire issue was getting out of hand, is what I believe in. So hence, Rajiv Gandhi had to sign that accord with the Sri Lankan president Jayawardene, and that can be determined as to whether it's a colossal failure or it was a success in trying to mitigate or in trying to provide safeguard the sovereignty of India. So that is a primary issue which comes to play.
Yeah, viewers, I think it's an imperative point to note that, like, see, the events which we are ascribing to is basically happened around the period of late 80s, 1988, 1987. So obviously it has been around 32 years. So many of them wouldn't even remember that such certain events happened. So I think to start off with, I think to remind the viewers, don't you think, Joel, we should, like, say, give a flash about, like, say, the Sri Lankan Civil War? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So for the viewers' sake, like this issue currently, the reason why we picked it up also is since it's pretty much on the news, especially with the Rajiv Gandhi's death anniversary, and also the Family Man season 2, wherein there's a lot of controversy going on that it's saying it's anti-Tamil as such. And also with M.K. Stalin, who's the current chief minister, writing a letter to the president. But this civil war, if we look at it, it's actually been a very pressing issue because it is a very long-standing issue, and I think one of the primary reasons for it was also like the only Sinhala Act, wherein the official language being Sinhala. Though later on you had Tamil also being included, but that was kind of the primary reason. But also I think that the British too. Everywhere that the British goes, it screws it up with every country. So be it
and
Israel
I think want to notice that, like, Sri Lanka also has a pretty diverse population. Like India, they have a lot of, say, Hindus, Buddhists. They have Moors, like all the descendants of the English people and etc. And it's actually surprising to note that if you notice, two conflicts have arisen of a state which has a Buddhist majority population. Like take the example of Myanmar and whatever the conflict has arisen over there due to, like, the Rohingya crisis. And you have seen in the past as to how Sri Lanka, being a Buddhist majority state, has resorted to arms. And like based on my, like, say, fair interpretation of the events, I feel that whatever happened during the Sri Lankan Civil War was no less than a Holocaust, because you literally saw the Tamils being forced to hide into forests. You saw them like say, for example, they were forced to, like, say, speak only Sinhala. They were not allowed to trade. They were not allowed to, like, say, participate in democratic elections and etc. So do you think it was a form of apartheid?
See, agreeably so, that especially with the UN reports also stating about how the genocide, what happened on Tamils especially. But to say that there was no political autonomy being granted can be a misnomer, because there were talks and there were also discussions saying that, okay, you can build up your district councils, or even the chief minister also coming from the northern province. I think that was not agreed upon by several groups, including the LTTE as such.
Yeah.
So if talking about political sphere, I think there was a good amount of representation, though on the ground, if you see, the discrimination was very high. But it's also a conflict between on how you adore a particular hero according to some, and a terrorist according to many. So that's an interplay as to how, if you take part in elections, will it actually serve your cause? Because if you know it, there were Tamil parties which were present, but they began to lose support once the people started. The people weren't especially happy with regard to the entire policy as such. So isn't that a particular stand with regard to how
I think as far as I remember, like, there were certain events during the presidency of Sirimao Bandar Naike, maybe in 1973, 1974ish, where you actually saw, like, say, Tamil parties being elected and be able to vote or, like, say, speak for the Tamils. But actually, what I think fair interpretation would be was they didn't largely represent the Tamil causes, because one, they were, like, say, in connivance with the ruling majority, and as well as they did not, like, say, work or, like, say, give the benefits which were accruable for the majority of the Tamil population. But actually, I genuinely feel that, like, was a guerrilla war necessary? Because as far as I know, I would genuinely support, like, say, Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence any day, because lack of bloodshed and winning a revolution is far more important than hundreds and thousands of people dying. But do you think guerrilla warfare, which was resorted to by Prabhakaran and co., was a legitimate sort of, like, say, getting the issue to be resolved?
Pramukh, thank you for getting me into the controversy. But anyway, I think the point being raised, but you must think of it, right? How was the genesis of the entire LTTE as such? Because there are other militant groups as well. But then why did the LTTE get in prominence? Is a different question, because they were not ready to give up their arms. And if you have arms against the state, I don't think any state will be tolerant with regard to it, even if you're fighting for a really good cause. So if you look into that picture, we did, ironically, the Indian government through RAW was actually training several of the Tamil militants to go against, especially in their fight against the government. Because if you remember, there was the infamous event of the Black July event, wherein several Tamils,
the Black July, yes,
for the matter of fact. So I think Indira Gandhi did feel a kind of a sympathy as such, if some may say. But then later on, don't you think it went out of hand? Is a different...
I'm going to put you in a tough position over here. Now, like, see, let's agree to the fact that as to how Sri Lankan Civil War, like, it's one of the larger conflicts which ever existed in, like, say, modern human history. Like, apart from the Korean War or the Israel conflict, which has been going on for 70 years, I think the Sri Lankan Civil War, like, took place for a good extent of 50 years. But you think, like, I'm going to just use my political intellect or my political bias. I don't know, people can comment whatever they want, but I genuinely feel that what happened in 1988 was because a Congress policy to claim Tamil Nadu. Because if you notice, MGR died around the same time, so there was a huge vacuum created in the state. Do you think that played a huge role into what, like, say, helped Rajiv Gandhi come to a conclusion on how he needs to send IPKF?
That's see, with regard to the politics in the state, even the party whip also of MGR had said that he had left the party. If you look at the infamous event, that you have been too soft, especially with regard to the Tamil cause. So I don't think it was inherently so. This thing only after MGR's death, it was also there during MGR's reign as well. But then, if you look into the particular aspect, I think once a country comes to you for help, it is a known reality that the Sri Lankan president kind of made Rajiv Gandhi the scapegoat and made the IPKF look in shame.
Yeah.
But also reality is that,
see, like, even in the Northeast as well, like, there was the entire insurgency as such.
and you had the entire situation going out of control in some parts. But then once they were brought to mainstream society, you had signed the peace talks, you had the Shillong Accord, you had the talks with the Mizo Front, and even with the Nagas, how we had handled it. Though there is still some amount of maybe a bit of separatism, but then the situation is under control because we have extended the olive branch to them, and also they have kind of come into the mainstream society by being a part of the politics, and also giving them the autonomy as such.
At the same time, you also need to consider, take the example of Naxals. The Naxals have been active for arguably 30 years. But do you think extending an olive branch at all times will help? Because as far as I know, they massacre CRPF, officials day in, day out if they are given the chance to. So do you think, I genuinely feel that there are certain radicals whom you can't, hope for peace with. Take the example of ISIS, take the example of Al-Qaeda. I don't think these are, radicals whom you can ever negotiate. Taliban, for the example, can negotiate because they believe in civility, they want governance and etc. But I think there are certain organizations which are extremely fanatical. They might never ever extend an olive branch or even sit together across talks for peace. But I think that's occurs majority across the world, I guess.
Your point, how by extending the olive branch, I completely agree. Many of the times when we have tried to give them another chance, you might have instances of several Naxal attacks or even several attacks as such. But I was saying, if there are instances of where they would like to come forward into the mainstream society, or even using them as intelligence to get in the inside information. So if you remember, there was Mahataya, who was part of the LTTE. He actually was killed by LTTE as such, because he was actually sending details to RAW for that particular matter of fact. So in order to get inside information with regard to the entire aspect of the army and stuff of the particular side, maybe that's where people might, the countries might use it as such.
But if I have to take a position on India's side, I completely agree with your points. But I think what helped, Rajiv Gandhi formulate his thoughts was, I think it was basically two conditions. I think under the UN Charter, every country has its right to self-defense under Article 51, and I think that can be a valid defense when you approach under international forums. But when it comes to regional, you need to understand that India focuses a lot on regional partners. Take the example of SAARC, or take the example of BRICS, or any other regional organization, maybe the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. All of these are regional organizations. And one thing I've noticed is that they sent regiments which are home to the people. For example, another mistake I've seen in the Congress regimes is that, for example, when they stormed the Gurudwara, during Operation Blue Star, they sent the Sikh regiment, and when they sent the IPKF forces to Sri Lanka, they sent the Madras regiment, which mainly consists of Tamils. Do you feel that Tamil soldiers killing Tamil men who are fighting for liberation or revolution, does that pose good theatrics, or is it ill thought of?
Somewhere when you look into that particular aspect, you might come across terms like subnationalism and nationalism, regionalism, and if it's your own countrymen, what would you be doing, and will you be valuing it over the nation interest at large? So those kind of questions does come at hand, and but I'm a little unsure with regard to that. But yeah.
But coming to the current, as to why it was raked up, I think you can discuss the MK Stalin statue in detail. But when it comes to family man, I think it was exaggerated.
Yeah. So, but coming back to that, don't you feel there were other events also happening? So, example, in Maldives also you had the coup, and you had several of the Tamil mercenaries who were though it was by the opposition side who were trying to take over the country, but then with the help of the Tamil rebels as such. So, don't you feel there again it's a sovereignty issue as well, because Maldives had to call us and call India, and then we had to send the forces over there as well. So, don't you think there are larger causes the cause of a separate state being diluted with other intelligence agencies or other countries trying to meddle with the entire issue at large.
Definitely, I agree, because at the end of the day, I think apart from like say regional cooperation and etc., we also see a lot of like say when it comes to big nations, when it comes to the United States, when it comes to China or even India, during certain cases they try to be the police force of like say other countries. For example, let's take the example of Bhutan or Nepal. These are small countries which indirectly depend, like say their economy, their politics, their ties, their religion. Most of it depends on India. So I feel that like say the Indian polity or the Indian bureaucracy exerts a lot of influence on how these countries conduct their internal affairs. So like it's almost like a semi-state, because Sikkim also was an independent state, if you notice, until 1970s. So they chose to join India like say ultimately. But I think these small nations like say Sri Lanka has historical connections. Like any person who's born in India has heard the story of Lord Rama, who has traveled to Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka has historical connections, like say going back to millenniums and millenniums. So I feel that like say smaller nations, I think indirectly depend on bigger nations to achieve a larger goal for regional cooperation.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And yeah, go on.
So coming to the current crux of the issue, I feel that it was exaggerated in the TV series Family Man. And I'm like viewers, mind you, I'm not making this judgment because the series is not yet released at the moment when we are recording this. But based on the trailer, I feel that it was exaggerated. Obviously, the directors can claim like say creative liberty and etc. and say that no, it's not LTTE. We haven't named it LTTE and etc. But it's pretty obvious as to how rebels who speak Tamil, who have similar costumes and etc. all point to like say one thing. And at one still in the trailer, I think I also saw the Sri Lanka map. So, but I think the entire crux of the issue is that one, they're rebels, and two, they're collaborating with ISI to break India. So I feel it's exaggerated and unwarranted, and it's unfortunate because, like say, I feel that Indian OTT makers at least take sensitive issues and trivialize it. But Joel, what do you think? What do you think of the OTT scene, and what are the bars or like say on how creative liberty should be used?
That's a very fair question, because especially I think even the Family Man, which was supposed to release I think somewhere in March, it had to be postponed because of the entire Tandav issue of how the entire OTT guidelines were also reformed. But then if you look at I think it's too early to judge like you said, it's too early to say with regard to what the creators are trying to imply by, because it's only a trailer. But since it also mentions, but don't you feel that, see, like with the larger picture in mind, it was also several, like especially with M.K. Stalin also writing the letter to release the convicts, but also several parties in Tamil Nadu which also act very contrary. For example, you had at one particular period of time, you had Jayalalitha once say that LTTE is using Tamils as a human shield in organizing with Lankan army, but then later on we saw her change as such. So don't you think people's views also change with time according to their own position as such, because whenever they feel convenient?
Yeah, I definitely do agree. Like, I definitely feel like majority of the politicians in India are turncoats. Like, whether when it comes to issue based or whether it comes to like say party based or ideology based, I see a lot of turncoats. Like a politician who's a spokesperson for one party might join another party the very next day and argue against the statements he might have made yesterday. So I think I find it pretty funny, and I also feel that there's no accountability, dude. Like when it comes to Indian politics and like say as a citizen and etc. I've never seen a leader who's like say 100% honest and 100% accountable. And it's not like every other country around the world is having the best leaders. At least the leaders should be accountable to a certain extent, because apart from like say stuff like we'll build roads, we'll build water canals and etc., when it comes to issue based stuff, they usually take a back turn looking at the political environment. Do you feel are we like say too judgmental on their part, or like are they doing the right thing?
Yeah, see, it's the term politics again. So it's on one's own convenience how one's changed. So you had several people also changed their parties in between. But then if you look at the larger picture, like wasn't India made like people consider Sri Lanka as what we say in America as to how they were dealing with Vietnam. It was kind of like India's Vietnam of sorts. So that there becomes a question with regard to intervention and those kind of particular aspects as such. But yeah, that's something which we should look into it. Would you think that even with there was no sense, there was no what do you say, the direct communication also with the leaders? So don't you think they also were tricked? So example, like the former president Chandrika Kumaratunge, he had given an interview to Shekhar Gupta of India Today quite a long time back, and in particular interview, when actually with regard to questions regarding the former president, the role which the Sri Lanka had played, and also how the entire situation had got out of hand, there also we had seen like the former president had actually supported the LTTE. Strange that actually support the LTTE by giving them funds, arranging them for weapons, because in that particular period of time there was sense among the general crowd and the Sri Lankan people as such, because they felt that India was kind of intervening into their entire matters as such. So I think they were they are in favor of the entire movement, the entire IPKF getting into the space, and the India government, what they felt was kind of intervening as such. So he was pretty much like when he was supplying them when India was supplying with the IPKF and also the kind of support and the materials, it was also in the back door you had the former president of Sri Lanka getting in close hands with the LTTE, and eventually he also had died. He was killed by the LTTE also, as well. So that is something which does expose and cause a threat as well. So don't you think with time also politics also, because with time, if in that particular period of time
it does because like sorry to interrupt you, because I've genuinely read an account where like say if you notice that rebels hated everything which was like say pro Sri Lanka or pro Sri Lankan government, because they used to burn vehicles, or like say if there was a soldier and etc., it would just like ambush him and attack. But I've noted I've read this book where a young kid and people who were hiding in the northern forest of Sri Lanka, whenever the Indian planes used to cross for reconnaissance or something, they actually at the later stages of the India's involvement in the war felt that India were the outsiders and Sri Lanka were the people who were inside, and it was their internal conflict. Like they actually said words like as to say who are these people to get involved in our matters, Sri Lanka is our home and etc. So I genuinely feel that there were nationalist sentiments on both sides, the pro Sri Lankans and as well as the Tamilians. It was just that the Sri Lankans at the same time were screwing over the Tamils at the same time by disenfranchising them. I think that was a very simple issue which was complicated into an international one.
Yes, definitely.
But what do you have to say with respect to the Stalin issue before we wind up?
I think I don't know at what stand is the Congress right now in also, because if their own ally partners go and seek for the release of the convicts, don't you think it goes against the entire party? For example, whatever be the case, I would believe that at Indira Gandhi and at Rajiv Gandhi, their lives were lost, especially with Rajiv Gandhi's case by outsiders in Indian soil, and also with the case of Indira Gandhi. So don't you feel that these two deaths have actually impacted the entire chain? So, for example, when I went to Sri Perambuttur, I just saw the place wherein there's actually this pretty big stone and the photo of Rajiv Gandhi.
It's called Shakti Sthal. What's it called? Is there a name to the monument?
I'm not really sure of that. I know it's in Sri Perambuttur, but I don't know what's the name of the thing. I think it's there's one huge Indian flag and one huge canvas of sculptures of the entire scene, and also there are Rajiv Gandhi's huge photo, a painted photo as such. So I see, I don't know if I were in that particular family, I don't know how it feels that it's your own father or your own, whatever be the character as such. Then at the end of the day, it's your own prime minister who was. Yeah. It's not just family. It's also let's not forget the prime minister of the country, and also since then, like now even the current government also is kind of abstaining from the entire vote procedure in the UN.
Yeah.
Don't you think was justice really delivered in the first place with regard to the entire issue?
I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm not the best judge to say whether justice was delivered, because, like, see, there are opposing views as to how, like, say, death penalty should be viewed and etc. So, for example, when it came to, say, assassination of Mahatma Gandhi or assassination of Indira Gandhi, there was, like, say, public demand for the execution of these people. Like, there was nobody in India who were like, oh God, Indira Gandhi. Like, even though she conducted and oversaw the emergency, which was, like, say, the darkest times in our country, but when she actually died in 1984, it felt that as if India lost a mother figure. Like, she was hugely respected, whether you agree or not with her policies. I think every Indian at some point needs to acknowledge that she has a huge impact on how India's governance functions to this day. So, and there was a huge demand for, like, say, execution of these guys. But when it came to Rajiv Gandhi, I feel it was politicized because, one, there was also, like, say, resentment within his own party, like with the Bofors scandal, with the handling of the Sikh riots and the Bhopal gas leak. He had a lot of failures, and at the same time, you can see the Rath Yatra was beginning to, like, say, establish itself, and he would also, like, say, overturn the Shah Bano stuff. So Rajiv Gandhi, like, say, is one of those grey characters in Indian politics. You really don't know whether he's positive or negative, or whether he found himself at the wrong time. We really don't know. So unless, like, say, we are able to evaluate properly as to if the information he had received was legitimate and genuinely a threat for India, then we can obviously say that, look, he actually sent IPKF for a reason. But at the same time, if it was unwarranted and it was motivated by political or external factors, I would, like, say, abhor whatever the events took place when it comes to national leadership. So I think justice should work that way. Like, unless we have, like, proper concrete information as to, and these are top secret information, dude. It's not like if we do more research or something, we get it. At some point, these should be disclosed to the public. It's 30 years now, but I don't think they will be. So I feel that
the closest one was able to reveal about certain details about it was, I think, in Madras Cafe, I think.
Yeah, Madras Cafe, yeah.
Well, you do have a few details with regard to how the raw itself was pretty much in a compromised situation as well, and how the government also was in a different state.
Yeah.
Like the reason why I was asking is because putting yourself in those shoes, do you feel that they like, since it was also, like, see, if India considers LTTE as terrorist organization, leave it aside. But even other countries like the UK and the European Union as well, and the US as well, has designated the LTTE as a terrorist organization. Do you think public sympathy for an organization like that, or even political parties in Tamil Nadu, a few political parties in Tamil Nadu, taking the cause of it, will prove detrimental to the Indian state as such?
I feel that, like, say, I don't think US is the best judge, because what happens to US is that they only look at their individual interests. So, for example, if there's a guerrilla, like, say, government in Sri Lanka, that will pose a huge threat for, like, say, maritime trade and etc. So, US relies heavily on the Indian Ocean. So, I mean, and apart from that, they have a lot of, like, say, inner dealings. So, for example, during that time, the Cold War was still at its height. So, you had, like, say, other factors, like Russia supporting a certain faction, and then US automatically had to ban that particular organization. So I think it works that way, because US literally opposes anything whom its opponents consider to be fair. Like, if if China, for example, considers, like, say, Bhutan legitimate, I will genuinely feel that US will start withdrawing itself from Bhutan relations, if there are any. So I think it works that way. Like, geopolitics work that way.
Yes, definitely. But in comparison to other movements as well. So, example, to this day, to this day, we still consider with several movements in our country to condemn the Khalistani movement, or people do condemn other such movements. But also, if it's your own countrymen, you would not be taking up that. You would not be, like, going against that cause. You would think we fought for it. And undeniably so, there were rapes and there were those huge activities being done. But the entire civilian issue was caught up between the LTT and the force as such. So are the regular civilians to be blamed for supporting, or is the entire thing issue too colluded to be talked about?
I honestly believe, like, say, when it comes to, like, say, when we evaluate our past, I think Indians aren't the best judge to, like, say, as a public, because if you notice, until recently, like, due to the advent of social media, everybody has an opinion because they're pretty well informed compared to, like, say, 20-30 years ago. But I feel like, say, during socialism, or, like, say, before the liberalization era, you hardly had, like, say, one news channel, which was Doordarshan, and that was, like, say, pro-government propaganda, if you call it. And also at the same time, your national newspapers also were forced to, like, say, print only what the government wants you to read. So I genuinely feel that you were automatically forced to support whatever the government feels like. See, for example, when the Kashmir genocide was happening in 1990s, so it's around the same time period, where did you see, like, say, a huge outcry? Like, if, for example, if you see Palestine, where there are 100 people killed, everybody across the world is condemning it. But when it comes to, like, say, 1990s, where 4 lakh people were, like, massacred over a span of 3 to 4 days, you didn't see any outrage. You just saw that, oh, dude, there's some issue happening, we must do something. That's it. But it wasn't, like, say, people coming on streets protesting, or, like, say, students protesting. I don't think that was a culture back then. I feel like due to liberalization, due to information age, or, like, say, the post-truth world where Indians were empowered to exercise their rights, I feel now we can protest. But I feel that, like, say, if you look at it that way, why didn't Indians protest during the 1975 emergency? Because there's no valid reason for that, because they're not well informed. Like, they trusted the government so much, and they relied heavily, like, everything from subsidies, everything from the land reforms, everything came from the government. So they would automatically trust the government with whatever they say. I feel that was the key reason behind why Indians didn't involve themselves back as much as they do now.
Yes. That's one thing, because even the Kashmiri issue also, unfortunately, I heard about it only 2-3 years back, and that because it has been suppressed, or it has not been released in the manner it ought to have been. So I think we as commoners also are very selective also in our approach as to who do we take sides on, and who do we take as one thing.
Yeah. So I think with that we can pretty much wind up. So Anis, do you have anything to say, Joel? I think it's a good way to wind up the podcast.
I think at the end of the day, I think since the LTTE has been defunct, and also the entire situation has been under control, the current situation needs to be looked at with empathy, because especially even now several of Tamil civilians have not been able to live in good conditions. So either India must act in a wise manner when it's voting in the UN, especially with regard to war crimes as such, but also looking into other country models, or even our own country, as to how we have tackled the entire insurgency issue and stuff like that. So I think, like, Sumukh, just a final question: are there any, like, especially in the Northeast, we do have these inner line permits. We have these border autonomy areas. Some people cannot go to certain areas. We have particular ministries as such. And also we have several articles in the constitution which protects several scheduled areas in the country, especially the Northeast. So don't you think such kind of models also is it present in Sri Lanka, or have they already aped those kind of models already, or they are yet to ape such models if for development of Tamils?
I feel that maybe they did have reservation. I'm not sure, but I think in the parliament they did have, like, say, certain reservation for, like, certain constituencies. Like, so for example, in India, like, if you notice, all the 543 Lok Sabha constituencies which we have, it's not like, say, anyone can go contest anywhere. Like, so for example, there are certain constituencies reserved only for the marginalized communities like SC or ST. So I think there were few, like, say, regions in northern Sri Lanka where they were actually given the benefit by, like, say, reserving only for Tamils. So I think they empowered it that way. But I think over time actually they focused a lot more on, like, say, getting policies which are equitable. So when they talk about the concept called as Sabka Saath Sabka Vikas, I think that was employed beautifully by Sri Lanka, because I think over time the radicalism gradually fell, and it was only barring Prabhakaran and a few to, who are actually fighting for, like, say, pro-Tamil Sri Lanka and etc. So I feel that Sri Lanka has actually done a good job in the past 30 years at least, in order to, like, say, bring the Tamil community to at least a certain level where they can actually participate in democracy.
Yeah. I think even the principle of proportionality is also one key factor, which you have heard, of course. Once you attack another person, either counter attack in similar proportion, and if you do it further, it actually causes a grave harm to everyone else around you. So that's the cause.
Yep. All right, Joel, it was a great session talking to you about Sri Lankan politics as well, like, say, India's position on non-interference. So thank you for coming on this podcast. I'm very glad to host you on this platform, and I hope that we can engage sometime in the future as well.
Sure, Sumukh. I thank Sumukh for inviting me to the session, and especially for bearing for all the inconveniences caused. So I thank you once again for the session, and hoping to have further sessions as well with him.
Yeah. Thank you, Joel. Thank you.